It's all super exciting because I worked on, when I was in college, I worked on a literary review that had sort of an opposite issue where it was like we had 10 editors and maybe 20 submissions, and we're like, how do we make something decent
Yeah,
out of what we're getting here? And now it's like having as many as we have, it's a blessing. It's the best problem in the world to have, to be busy with that amount of awesome stuff. So
totally.
yeah. All right, cool. We got some people in, so we're gonna get rolling here. Welcome back to Literary Live Streams. Welcome back to the Overgrowth Podcast. If you're watching this after it's been live streamed, welcome Broad Kitty to the chat. Uh, so I wanted to go ahead and say before I introduce our guest here, we have done some pretty heavily focused on poetry or art in general streams on our two that are already out. Um, we are going to get to some fiction on the next stream. So if you're jonesing for some fiction discussion, that'll be on Wednesday. And then I'm also working on putting together a photography episode that focuses more on photography for the people who are here for photography. It's just as important to me and to the publication as the other two. And it frames pretty much everything that we do in our aesthetic. And so I really would love to talk about that. It's also my favorite one to maybe like geek out about on a specs level a little bit. Um, that said, this particular episode is going to be oriented toward a little bit more the business side of what we're doing. As Overgrowth is technically a corporation, it is a limited liability corporation, but a corporation nonetheless. Um, and we have somebody here who knows a little bit more of the business angle of things, and that's Emily Campbell here. Emily is an entrepreneur. Is that fair to say?
I think so. I love
Yeah,
that.
an entrepreneur, marketing extraordinaire, and also a podcast host with more experience than I have. So it'll be valuable for me. Emily, how are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm very happy to talk to you, run some things by you, and get your take on them. Emily and I worked together at a local law firm called Baggett Law, where Emily is, in my opinion, the backbone of the entire operation over there. Um, it would fall apart without her. I think everybody there would agree. Uh, it'd be okay, but you do a lot, and you're awesome at it, and was one of my favorite people to work with when I was there. Uh, she's also great with marketing, which I have been doing the bulk of for Overgrowth, and and has run a small business in the past, and so the big difference between I think there are some big differences, Emily, between you and I in terms of our approaches to business, to life, and to money. I think that would probably be fair to say just from you knowing me.
Totally.
Yeah. Um, but what is your take on how am I doing so far? First and foremost, as the most important part of all of this, a podcaster, the most prestigious undertaking any person can have in this life in this society, and then secondly, as somebody who's trying to get a small thing upstarted and going.
I have been so impressed, truly. I really do
Nice.
mean it. Because I think something that a lot of people really, really struggle with when they start something new is having like a solid brand identity, especially when they're trying to find like what they want and what they want it to look like and feel like and sound like. And I feel like your vision from the beginning was very clear and intentional. So even just with like the colors you're using and the vibes and the photos and all of that, it's very cohesive, and that's something that most people take a very long time to really nail down. So I commend you on that.
Thank
It
you.
all very, very cohesive, and like you really, took your time figuring out what you wanted to feel like, and kind of that essence. So you're killing it in that regard for sure.
Thank
And
you
then
very
you can
much.
talk to a brick wall. I think like you were meant to be a podcast host. I think that was just in the cards for you.
There's a good chance that I have spoken to a brick wall while photographing it before, being like, "Oh, look at you."
Yeah.
But thank you, and it's very helpful that our branding and our general aesthetic is like exactly what appeals to me, which I think is super important if you're doing anything that you actually care about. And like if anybody's ever seen my arm is covered in the tattoos that if this were in color you could tell is essentially exactly what our brand is. So it's on my body. Like our brand identity in a way is my identity. Now, I will say I have and this is not a moral thing or anything. I just have like a general um, uh, aversion uh, to commerce. I would say it's like something that is just I don't know why. It could be just having like a retail and service background and doing that for a long time, and then also being kind of a bleeding heart artist, and working on a lot of things that I know will never make me money. That I've kind of come to this point of like acceptance within myself that a lot of the things that I do are never going to materialize in cash. That it's I'm going to have to be rewarded in other ways, and I think that a lot of other people that are submitting to us and want to live this art life, a lot of the time the quicker you can come to acceptance on that, and then it's like a bonus if you ever make a dollar doing it. You'll be a lot happier doing it if you're not looking to sell it a lot. But we are not trying to go under, and we are not trying to uh, lose everything we've put in, and we want to keep this going for a long, long time, which we will. But I wanted to go ahead and send you over, and I gave you no briefing on this, but I'm going to go ahead and send you over our kind of bare bones of our budget. So I'm going to paste this into the Discord chat real quick for you to see. And I just want you to give us a quick audit here of how we're doing. What you think are where you think we can cut the fat, what you think our income versus our outgoing expenses are. I'm gonna switch over here so that people can see this on stream. So for anybody who's listening to just the audio rip of this, I'm gonna give you a quick breakdown. So this is Overgrowth's cost revenue breakdown. So our costs right now, and these are real figures. They are round figures, but these are also real figures. Emily, I feel like something about your face says that you're not incredibly impressed by our numbers thus far, but I'm gonna wait. I'll get your opinion, I guess, after we go through them. So our website rights and management software and licensing and all of that is about $400 a year. Our marketing budget is about $600 a year, so that's $50 a month. That's not bad. Our We have ordered stickers, and we will have those available for sale soon. Those were $170. We have ordered, or we are about to order T-shirts, which is cool. Those will be $600 for about 100 shirts. So those are kind of our outgoing costs right now. Very simple, not a difficult business structure. Now, here's our incoming right now. So our kind of three modes of revenue are YouTube, Twitch, and Patreon. Now, YouTube, we're making currently $0 a month on, which, we're new, so that's fine. But it's $0. So I feel like we can really only go up from there, and that might be a number that over time we want to see rise. Is that fair to say, do you think?
Very fair.
Very
I
fair.
think so many people start things for so long and they see these figures and they just give up, after a couple of months.
Mm-hmm.
But people that stick with it,
I'm going to do this until I die.
they make it.
I'm going to do this until I make at least $20 on YouTube. Our Twitch, also $0. So, we're not affiliates with either of these places yet because we're so new. But just, for full transparency for anybody interested in what's going on over here, that's also $0 right now. Our Patreon, however, is currently netting $4.50 a month. We're not really offering much on there, so that's just for patrons who are interested in supporting us. But And I was good at math in school generally, so I can tell just by an eyeball. I don't need to break the calculator out here. That I feel like our costs are outweighing our revenue right now. Would that be fair to say?
I would say
Okay.
that's a fair
Um,
assumption.
I would also, in transparency is the name of the game here. We're putting it all out on the table. The Patreon money is actually I am the only subscriber, so I'm actually sending myself that money, and then Patreon's keeping 50 cents. So that actually is technically in the loss column too. So I really have very little counterbalancing the red here. On the stream, Emily, the cost is in red and the revenue section's in green. So,
But
um, yeah, what numbers would you like to see change here
oh,
if we were to be successful?
oh my goodness, you know the numbers, Maxwell.
All right.
You- You're in this for the right reasons, and that's what's going to set you apart
Yeah,
forever.
absolutely. I just wanted to get a professional eyeball on this thing.
We'll have a separate meeting soon.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Sounds good. Do you think this is a sustainable business model if we continue at this rate?
I think you've got it.
I've got it.
You've
Hell
got
yeah. Cool. Um, nice. That's what the other jobs are for.
it. Exactly.
Okay. So I want to go straight from that into a great way I found, and I don't need to send you this link because it's very short. I'm just going to read you something quick. I was looking on Quora. Now, we don't, this is not an internet based show that we do here, but I will say that it is, we kind of use it to structure out and have larger conversations around these posts. But this one I want to be kind of like more of a scalpel with because I think that this is some great advice. This says, what are some good marketing strategies for a small business? And the top answer is, and I'm just going to read the first sentence of this, maybe the second. Um, just over 2 years ago, when we started payrollpanda.my, we set out to own the word payroll in Malaysia. We decided that whatever happened, we would not let any of our competitors take ownership of this word in Malaysia. So I just wanted to ask two questions. What is a word that I should own in Malaysia? And then what words do you currently own or does Bagot Law currently own in Malaysia that are helping you guys?
I did not know I was going to get so many curveballs today.
Sorry.
Goodness.
Oh, no, I
Um,
assumed that this would be kind of an obvious one.
oh my gosh, I can't think of just one word for you.
I was thinking if I could own the word art, that'd be a pretty heavy hitter.
Top of the funnel words is what we're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. And,
Like
mhm,
breath, art,
there we go.
water.
Yes. I want to be with words in Malaysia how Nestle tries to be with water in Africa, you know?
Yes.
Um, so yeah, I think art would be a great one. How much do you think that'll set me back?
Oh goodness. The sky's the limit.
Yeah. Okay.
As much art as in the world.
Money is not no object. It's not an issue. I'm not too concerned about it. I did also want to, while I was on here, just read you a quick post from what I think is the most horrible person I've ever seen on the internet. That's fairly unrelated, but I think is just worth reading. So this was about when I was looking up how you could make, people were asking like how can I make money on the side as a writer and stuff like that. This one has like nothing to do with writing, but it was just in my thing and I had to give it. This person says, Regina says, is it possible for someone to earn money by reporting their employers to immigration authorities for hiring workers without proper documentation or permits? No one anywhere pays you to do your duties as an honest person. And I was like, dude, that's up there for the most offensive thing I've ever read on the internet. Can I get paid to report? Can I get not just like, oh, like they're just like a xenophobic person in general, but they want to be able to capitalize off of that, which is pretty disgusting. So I wanted to give a live comment here and say, I believe Germany paid for these sorry, I'm typing like high up services in the 1930s. Go ahead and send that out there. Um,
Yeah,
nice.
it's
Nobody
really
had commented, so I feel like, they're really looking for something. Um, cool. Just gonna get them uh, over a suggestion. If they want to make a time machine, go back to Germany in the 1930s. I think that's the right place for them to be.
you're right.
Cool. All right. I now would like to move us over to discussing a business. I'm going to send this to you in the chat again here. You might already have this link, but this is a small business that somebody would like an opinion on. So this person says, is poetry book selling a viable option? Um, I'm going to go ahead and give a kind of preemptive, like, unfortunately not, but I would love to hear them out. So this person says, want to set up a small business selling poetry books, new and used, on my boat in London. I am aware that poetry is an incredibly niche market, and I can find hardly any poetry-only bookstores or any data on how big this industry is. Is this at all worth pursuing? It will start off very small and without a set mooring location, but my hope is that the novelty and serendipity of it being on a boat will encourage more people to try out poetry. But it worries me that no one else is doing this and suggests it's doomed to fail, lol. What is your immediate take when reading this? I have one, but I would love to get yours genuinely.
I don't know. I think anyone doing something that others haven't done yet or thought of yet is so appealing to me. I feel like I'd invest in it immediately.
I actually agree with you, and I think like of all of the things that I've read online, people like wanting to, sell their poetry and trying to be like, well, you can pay me and I'll write a sonnet for you for Valentine's Day, that sort of stuff. That I think is very difficult to do. I think the traveling poetry boat in London is like the coolest idea I've ever heard of. And if I were to go to London and knew that this thing existed, I'd be like, where is it docked? Like, you gotta go. Um,
100%. It's so romantic sounding.
it's it's the most like beautiful business idea I've ever heard in my life. Like,
I love how humble this person is.
totally. He's like, I would just love to do it. I don't know if it's realistic, but I'm like, I also think that when I read this for the first time, I was like, I almost feel like if you can do it and you love poetry and you have a boat in London that you can don't even have a set mooring location for, which is just beautiful. I was like, you almost have a moral responsibility to do this.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
Completely. Yes.
It's it's such a phenomenal thing to exist in the world as the traveling London poetry boat that I don't think that we can afford not to have it in our society.
I agree. They're sleeping on the fact that they're living everyone else's dream.
Uh, Absolutely. If I could pick a life, this would probably be it. And to be fair, I think a couple people in the comments, this person says poetry is not a viable business for anyone. Nobody makes any money in it. Not the poets, not the publishers, and not the booksellers. That being said, you should 100% do this. And I think that that is great advice there.
Yes.
Yeah, like don't worry about it. If it's not gonna sink the boat, go nuts. Uh, so yeah, I had the exact same take on that. Um, Now, Emily, something else that you have that is uh, a special perspective, I think, is that you are a Christian who is a liberal and lives in Florida. So these are kind of a rare combination. Um, and I wanted to get your take on something a little bit less, a little bit, I guess, slightly more serious, which is how do you view religious works of art? I know that's like a big question. Do you interact with them, uh, like, be it fiction, be it, I mean, there's plenty to say that the Book of Psalms or the Book of Proverbs is a religious work of art. There's plenty to say that even the beautiful translation of the original King James Bible is a literary masterpiece. Um, And uh, but outside of that, in a more modern context, do you ever interact with like Christian writing, Christian movies? I don't know about Christian photography, but
Yeah, I think I do. That's a really good question. I feel like I'm thinking of like two very different types of Christian art in my head and which ones I might resonate with and which ones I may not. But I think it's all about like the way that something leaves you.
mm-hmm.
I had this conversation with my husband yesterday who wants to get a tattoo of Jesus's face on his arm, and he was
Righteous.
showing me different designs, and some of them, quite frankly, were just terrifying. And I was like, that made me feel so sacrilegious to get Jesus with like these like creepy curls in his head and like creepy eyes. Like I don't know. I think I'm big on like vibes. I really am. Like when I see something,
Yes.
like for example, I've seen a lot on Facebook some distant relatives with like this illustration of like Jesus like over Donald Trump's shoulders, like with like these wings.
Yeah.
That gives me a very different feeling than like the Last Supper, on the
Sure.
wall that
Sure.
you're at all
Absolutely.
day. So that's a really loaded question. But I would say I do interact with it and am big on the vibes that I get when I look at it.
Cool. Yeah. I
Visual.
also I think it's a kind of it's a difficult thing to do well because like a lot of other um, art that is message based in a way or based around a social or political topic, which religion kind of inherently is, even though it means more than that to a lot of people. And disclaimer here, I'm not religious. But a lot of the time, if you're looking to create any sort of art to deliver a certain message, that the art itself can suffer. And a lot of the best, in my opinion, religious art is things that the artistic project was put first and then informed by that person's religion. Because I think it's like that in any sort of artistic space. If you put the art first, your values and your sensibilities and the things that you care about are going to materialize in it.
So
Um, and they could even do so in ways that you don't expect. But a lot of the time, when somebody sets out to make a point with what they're making, that's when you get something that, like, they're like, I want to drive this home, or I really want to, put this idea in people's heads. That's kind of when you start to uh, lose that ability to go in with a completely like open space and make art that is meaningful and resonant. And like you said, some of it resonates with you. Then I think of other artists like the director Paul Schrader. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he was raised in a Calvinist convent. And so he's often kind of exploring those ideas, even though he's no longer religious. His stuff can't help but be informed by the values that he gained when he was there, his own internal struggle with those values. And in the end, he's able to produce a brilliantly complex film and piece of writing that kind of gets at the heart of the humanity of these things. Martin Scorsese's Silence is another great example of that, where your ideas about religion are expressed through you putting the art first, but then having a very strong feeling of this thing behind it. Does that make sense?
totally, totally,
Yeah.
and I think that's true for lots of things, beyond religion, like those things that are so deep rooted within us that we learned, by observation or just by being who we are. They
Right.
are bound to come out in one way or another.
Definitely, absolutely, and I think I'll read and I totally am sympathetic to it and I appreciate it, but I've been reading tons and tons of submissions for Overgrowth. I love so many of them, and there are plenty that I agree with in terms of the message that they're trying to get across, whether that be um, about sociopolitical issues, which is typically what it is. But I think a lot of the time people mistake the statement itself for being the soul of what a piece of art should be. And I'll say that maybe a little bit better right now, which is that when you're writing about something that is in itself a heavy topic, um, you are you almost feel like relieved of the need to create meaning in a piece of art because you know that there's going to come a punch from somebody's preconceived ideas about this thing. So that can be a story, and I talked about this with on the last episode, that ends in suicide, and then you don't have to write that good of a story because you're really hinging on the fact that something crazy happens at the end, and that's gonna be like what people go like wow and remember. Or if you're writing about a political issue, it can be like, oh, people will agree with this, and if people agree with it, then that is the audience that I'm looking for. I'm looking for somebody who agrees with the points that I'm making. um, and that kind of relieves you of the responsibility to go like, okay, what if completely devoid of the subject matter is this artfully crafted? You know, is this well put together? What is the lineation of this poem like? Are the lines of this piece of fiction really tight? Is the character still a character despite this particular struggle? Do they have another dimension to them? And I think that that's something that a lot of people should consider when creating anything with political roots, religious roots, or strong events that happen within a work, because it's a difficult thing to do, but at a certain point you realize that you're kind of leaning on this thing as the crux of your work instead of the artistry itself. I know I might have been a bit redundant there, but just trying to drive that point home a little bit.
That makes so much sense. And I think like in that journey and when those moments that you really, like resonate with those things in the middle, it's always, throughout the journey before you really get to the like the point, for lack
Mm-hmm.
of a better, that's where it hits the hardest. I feel
Absolutely.
that's when it really, really you drive those things home because I feel like we all expect those things that
Yeah.
are, the wow moments. We expect it, what we're not expecting the things that really stay with us.
Yeah, and a really simple, like, obvious tactile example of something like this is you can watch a movie like one of the John Wick movies. I love those movies, and you can see this guy kill 100 people over the course of a movie, right? And the way that kind of death is framed in those movies is almost like bodies are dropping all over the place. So when a kill happens, uh, it doesn't really mean a whole lot, even though somebody just got shot and died, right? Then you can watch another movie that's like a drama. And if somebody dies in that, oh my gosh, it shakes the entire movie, right? If somebody were to get shot and killed in Pride and Prejudice, that would be crazy. Like, and it would have so much more weight for that individual moment just because of the way that everything is framed. So, a shot, somebody getting shot by a gun and killed in something is not inherently a heavy idea, especially like in America with the way our media is. We see it all the time. It's in tons of stuff. We've got crime thrillers and not just in movies, but in books and all sorts of stories. Um, and so that's something that I've always try and stay conscious of is when you're trying to have a dramatic moment in anything or a moment that brings home a poignant point, it has to feel very, very earned by the piece itself, and it's going to land so much harder. You know, Martin Scorsese's Silence, which I won't talk about too much, but if anybody has ever seen that movie or is interested in seeing that movie, by the time that it gets to that point where you feel like a point has been made, you've spent so much time with this character and so much time with this person and their moral quandaries that when you leave this project, you're left with so much to consider besides that last shot, besides how it ended, besides what maybe the message or more obvious takeaway to you was. There are a million ideas bouncing around in your head. You feel bad and empathetic for multiple perspectives, and it really opens your mind and your heart to explore those things. So I think that's a way that like any sort of spiritual work can be incredibly powerful. or any sort of political work that deals with moral quandaries can be incredibly powerful as well. On that note, I would love to have you, if you're willing to, read a poem that I sent you in the Discord chat, called Jesus Christ Goes on Joe Rogan.
Oh boy.
If you wouldn't mind gracing us. If you don't want to, I can read it.
I can read it. Let me go up here. Let's see. Okay, here we are. Okay, I'm having to like tilt my head a little.
No, all good.
Okay. Jesus Christ on a Joe Rogan podcast. Let's see. If Jesus had a gun, would they cite the Second Amendment? Or would they brainwash the youth, peering down the barrel of the American dream, unrepentant, hiding the truth? Jesus had a gun, and no, it wasn't an AR-15. They said, I'd rather die than do that, demoralizing the diasporic, casting pride as a sin in the plethoric sexual preconception conditioned deep into their skin. So they'll sentence 20 to life for those who stand on the edge of a knife to their identity like a criminal physician. Removing your damned breast for the sake of being uniformly woke. Ironically, the butt of our jokes is this is a communist text. They respond printing fascist text 280 characters or less. If Jesus had a gun, would they pull the trigger for you?
So any immediate takes on this?
Well, that was a little disorienting reading it that way.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. Goodness, I feel like I'm so bad. I have to read things like 3 times.
Well, if it helps, I have read this 3 times, and now I've had it read to me once, and I'm still not entirely sure what point is exactly being made here.
I'm glad it's not just me.
No, I think that if I wanted to expend the mental energy, we could probably get there. But this is something that I think wears its heart on its sleeve and tries to be extremely current, and is maybe an example of one of those pieces that I was talking about where they really want to make a point. And so they're kind of bringing in a lot of current issues that a lot of people would agree with. They're taking shots at Twitter. They're taking shots at the AR-15, though widely. I will say the main image that this leaves me with, though, is not one of feeling of like, yeah, or like anything. It really leaves me with the idea of Jesus with a gun. And actually, since an AR-15 is the only one mentioned, I'm really left with the image of Jesus Christ in Bible times in sandals holding an AR-15, which actually that would be a great tattoo for Kyle.
I'll add that to the Pinterest board.
Yeah.
The title's really throwing me off. I'm just seeing him like by a mic by Joe Rogan, like sitting on a podcast. That's all. That's where I stop.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go through it real quick. If Jesus had a gun, would they cite the Second Amendment? Okay, so when I first read this, and maybe this is just the culture in the world that I'm in, but when I read would they, I was like, is Jesus non-binary? Because is Jesus the one? Who are they? Because the only person referenced so far is Jesus. So I was like, if Jesus has a gun, would they cite the Second Amendment? Because it's like Jesus is the one holding the gun. But I'm guessing he means this other group of people.
Right.
Okay. Or I don't know, haunting scribe means that. Would they brainwash the youth, peering down the barrel of the American dream, unrepentant, hiding the truth? Jesus had a gun, and no, it wasn't an AR-15. They said, I'd rather die than do that. Demoralizing. This person has a lot of ideas, I think is so many ideas. And this is so intimate to them and their perspective that it becomes almost slightly unintelligible as a piece of somebody Piglet Fartface in our chat said that they thought that Jesus was also being referred to as a non-binary person when we read it the first time. that it's almost unintelligible and not really maybe a very fine work here.
I have to.
Yeah, which I think is fair to say. Um, Now, this is not at all by any means an offensive post here, but there is a comment underneath it that I do think is quite offensive to my artistic sensibilities, which I will pull up here and I'll just read this to you. It says, "This has for me the same concentrated moral outrage as Amiri Baraka's Somebody Blew Up America." Now, I don't know, Emily, are you familiar with the legendary political activist and poet like Master Amiri Baraka?
You don't want the answer to that question.
It's
So
okay
you
if
know,
you're not. I learned about him in English classes, and in writing classes.
you should know from working with me that I
No,
know.
that's totally fine, but that's okay. A lot of people probably aren't. Amiri Baraka is a sort of national treasure and a brilliant poet. And he wrote about a lot of social issues, and I think he's a good foil. I think the reason that this offends my artistic sensibilities is because comparing this poem to the work of Amiri Baraka to me is a little bit like, excuse me? Um, and Amiri Baraka is a phenomenal, phenomenal poet, and he did really great live readings of his poetry too, which is sort of something I think in the way he did it, that's a little bit of a lost art. By the way, I wanted to compliment your reading of that poem was much more fluid than the first one that I did in my head. So I'm really glad that I had you read it because I probably would have tripped over it a little bit more than you did. So great work. Um, Amiri Baraka, a big influence on Kendrick Lamar. This specific poem that they're referencing here, "Somebody Blew Up America." I'm not going to pull this one up because it's about 10 minutes long. It's meant to be heard out loud, and he usually has like jazz players playing behind it when he would perform it. And it's a beautiful, very profound, awe-inspiring piece of literature. But I would very much like to read another Amiri Baraka poem, which I can do this one. It's a little bit longer. And so here, let me go ahead and get you this over in the Discord chat in case I have not already, and we'll go through it. And this is one of my favorite works of his, and it's maybe slightly less socially charged than some of his other poems, but there's plenty in there and plenty to kind of show his showcase his talent here. So this is called "As Agony as Now" by Amiri Baraka. I am inside someone who hates me. I look out from his eyes, smell what fouled tunes come into his breath, love his wretched women. Slits in the metal for sun, where my eyes sit turning at the cool air, the glance of light, or hard flesh rubbed against me, a woman, a man, without shadows or voice or meaning. This is the enclosure, flesh, where innocence is a weapon, an abstraction, touch, not mine or yours. If you are the soul I had and abandoned when I was blind and had my enemies carry me as a dead man, if he is beautiful or pitied, it can be pain. As now, as all his flesh hurts me, it can be that, or pain. Or when she ran from me into that forest, or pain. The mind, silver spiraled, whirled against the sun, higher than even old men thought God would be, or pain. And the other, the yes. Inside his books, his fingers, they are withered, yellow flowers, and were never beautiful. The yes. You will, lost soul, say beauty, beauty, practiced as a tree, the slow river, a white sun in its wet sentences, or the cold men in their gale, ecstasy, flesh or souls, the yes. Their robes blown, their bowels emptied, they chant at my heels, not at yours. Flesh or soul as corrupt, where the answer moves too quickly, where the God is a self after all. Cold air blown through narrow blind eyes, flesh, white hot metal, glows as the day with its sun. It is a human love. I live inside, a bony skeleton, and you recognize as words or simple feelings. But it has no feeling. As the metal is hot, it is not. given to love. It burns the thing inside it, and that thing screams. That is a beautiful, wonderful, masterful, rolling poem. Um, as Agony as Now, it's so artfully composed and so there's so much also in this one to consider, but it is laid so gently and eloquently at your feet that you're much more willing to engage with and consider it. And I think there's also a lot to say about a piece of art that you do not fully get every idea in the first time you read it, but you can really feel the spirit of it, and that's exciting, because that lets you go back into it, and rediscover it over and over again, to a point where you really come to the level of meaning that you're searching for from it. For me, this is a poem deeply steeped in self-loathing, but in that also sympathy for the self, because it conjures a lot of empathy for the reader, for the person that's in this position. Um, and yeah, just a really lovely work. And so that's not an exact contrast to the previous poem, but just in reference to not every work perhaps that strives to be uh, a work of societal commentary is Amiri Baraka. And Amiri Baraka wrote a lot of poetry like this in addition to, his stuff that might have been a little bit more on the nose, commenting on issues at the time. He was a master of his craft first and foremost. And then when it came time for him to be able to write something that was maybe a little bit more personal or socially in vogue, um, uh, he could do that with a level of skill that many people do not have.
Yeah, yeah. Beautiful. And I feel like feeling so many things in such a close proximity to each other.
Mm-hmm.
It, yeah. So, and what I love is that like it can be, I don't know, I just love when people use things that are so personal to something you may have experienced to where you can try to imagine what they're feeling, even though it's so uncomparable.
It
So,
really is. That's a beautiful thing. And I think that art is able to do that in a way that just even me talking to you and trying to express myself to you through a conversation that we might have, there are certain complexities in this life that we haven't really built ways to express, besides art. So it can kind of take you to a place of appreciation for somebody else, somebody from a different culture, or background, and have things resonate with them, um, or within you that also resonated within them, because you are taken on this. They deliver you an experience essentially, and I think it's worth saying, that I said earlier Kendrick Lamar was heavily inspired by Amiri Baraka, especially with To Pimp a Butterfly. That album, you can hear a lot of Amiri Baraka's spoken word voice sort of in there in Kendrick's voice, and that I think for he's Kendrick is also somebody who's able to kind of like take this life that a lot of people haven't lived and like illustrate it so well that like somebody who's never been in a situation like the situations that he has experienced or grown up in, it can kind of hit them profoundly, and they open their eyes to like a different world, different set of experiences, and have like an appreciation for the struggles of people who are in that world. And at the same time, you can fully acknowledge that you basically have no idea what he's talking about outside of this, but thank you for giving me a window into this experience. And I think that's something that art can do really beautifully.
yeah, it feels like just so connected. And I'm even struggling like in this to be able to communicate what I'm thinking or feeling, which I feel like is probably something that's learned
Right.
when talking about art, because you're right, it is just so like intrinsic. Like it's hard to even like verbalize the way that it makes you feel because it's just so dynamic beyond words.
Totally. And that's great. I think it's great when art makes you feel something that you cannot re-express to somebody else. And you tell them you have to read it. You've just got to read it. You've just got to watch it. You've just got to listen to it. Um, because you can't re-deliver the experience or express the experience that you had with a profound piece of art to somebody. If you could, we could read the synopses of the art and but there's nothing like experiencing it. So I think that's something that's really really cool. You learn if you take like kind of later on literary theory classes, or maybe you also hear whispers of it in earlier literature classes of there's this idea in kind of the English community that's it goes back a long way, and I forget exactly who pioneered it, but that you can never quite it drove one guy crazy. Like it drove him actually crazy that you can never express an idea purely to another person ever, even if you were to tell them this curtain is red. And you would think that that is a direct one-to-one. I know what a curtain is. You know what a curtain is. I know what red is. You know what red is. But because I am a different person than you, I probably have a preconceived notion of curtains and what the texture of them is and how they hang and where they're placed and how long they typically are. When I think of my Plutonian ideal of a curtain, it's probably or Platonian, sorry, or Platonic ideal of a curtain is probably very different from yours. If I just say the word curtain, what I imagine is what different from what you imagine, and in that way, there are these little microscopic distinctions in the way that everybody interprets every single word that exists. Um, it's fine because we can communicate with each other well enough to go about our lives and coexist with each other and live in camaraderie. But they were like, wait, in a certain sense, I'm completely trapped within myself. I can never fully be 100% in sync with the person sitting next to me. And it's a shame that that drove that guy crazy because that's actually really cool. And while I get that that could be a very isolating idea philosophically, I also think that it is a incredibly beautiful idea that is, um, as much as I believe morally in the idea of social cohesion and people working together and coming together and like the communal aspect of both artistry and humanity. I also think it's incredible that we are that individualistic at the same time. I don't think that those two things are mutually exclusive at all. I think they should actually really, and they do, um, complement each other really well so that we can get things like this and have experiences like the ones we're talking about.
So true. So true. I think that is something I've never thought of in that way, but to be able to grasp that, I think is art in itself and communication and any form of interaction with another
Yeah,
person. 'Cause that's almost like a beautiful like mystery of like what other people's, like life perspective is really in everything beyond art.
yeah, absolutely. It's a lovely thing, and once you open yourself up to that, like that's what art's supposed to make you feel something, and what it makes you feel. That was the objective of the piece of art, even if it wasn't exactly what maybe the artist was intending when they made it. The objective of art as a whole human project that exists is meant to open us up, make us feel, make us have experiences, make us sympathetic toward each other. And I think, honestly, like if I'm at my purest form, to make us better just by considering more um, and more things more complexly. Um, yeah, um, that is now it's Amiri Baraka, as I said, I gave him a lot of praise. Very difficult act to follow, but I would love if you would be the act to follow Amiri Baraka. Um, I asked Emily to prepare a haiku for us. Now, before we do this, I'll give you some space between this poem and yours. Um, in saying that we just launched a haiku competition on our Instagram, and we're going to be doing a haiku a haiku off, where we pit two against each other. People vote on them, and it's like a tournament style. So we'll whittle it all the way down to one, and it's just going to be decided by our followers and our voters, which is going to be super fun, and I'm really excited about it. But in order to, and don't worry, Emily, I also oh, sorry. Piglet Fartface again in the chat says, the best haiku I ever read, I saw on a graphic tee. Please send it. Please send it so I can read it in this chat. But yes, that'll be really fun. But I also wanted to maybe to promote that, get your haiku, Emily. I'll read Piglet Fartface's real quick here. Haikus are easy, but sometimes they don't make sense. Refrigerator. That's a good one.
I love it.
Yeah.
Simple.
Yeah. Okay, so Emily, I asked you to write one themed around your general girl boss nature. Is that right? Was that my prompt?
That's right. This was so much harder than it should have been. But I'm sure the listeners and viewers can tell that this is not my first language.
Haiku. You don't speak primarily in haiku?
Or, just, I don't know, this like really deep, artistic, poetic writer world is something, honestly, you kind of introduced me to, just like working with you, and you would let me read your stories. And I think every time you let me read something and you would tell me what you were going for, what it was supposed to be about, my idea of what it was about was completely different than what you're going for, which, goes off of what you're saying. So
I think I remember saying that too when you would read it and be like, oh, I was feeling like more like this. And I'm like, awesome, cool.
Yeah.
Word. That's not what I was going for, but yeah.
Yeah. So fun. Okay, well, you'll have fun with this.
Yes, please.
Okay. Shards fall from the sky as shadows yield to your light, unbound by bloodlines.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful haiku. Now you have no need. You can do the David Lynch and say, and when I ask you to explain it, say no, which I think is cool. But also, if you would like to take us through it, I would love to.
Sure. Yes. Again, this Maxwell also knows that I'm a fan of AI.
Yes. Yeah.
And I was not allowed to use AI, which I would never do that to you. I would never be a fraud on your
Thank you so much.
Platforms. But what I found is that I had to I'm a very like black and white person. So I just want to like say things. Like, let's just call it as, and that doesn't work well with poetry. As I was watching a video on how to write a beautiful haiku over the week. So I had to start with like really general ideas and then try to make it poetic.
That is so sweet that you watched a video on writing haikus. That's really very, very nice.
If it would have been like, you go girl, break glass ceilings, knock them dead. But we pulled the artistic.
Yeah, I love it. No, yeah, thank you. It's really nice.
But yeah, honestly, I just think so much of like business, and it's not even just being a woman in business, but of course that's like my perspective.
Sure.
And I don't even like when I have these conversations to talk about like women in leadership or women bosses. It's really just women in business.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's still something that's hard for women, old, young. It's just something that unfortunately is something we have to talk about and just be, straight with each other, that it's not easy, and you are put behind whether you want to acknowledge it or not. thankfully I've been, surrounded by people who have let me sit at tables that I wouldn't have sat at if it weren't for them.
Yeah.
So I feel like because I've had that privilege, I have this responsibility to be outspoken about the fact that people can do it, and that they are equipped, if not more equipped, by being a woman, to lead and things like that. So really, to me, shards from fall from the sky is just, believing that you can break those glass
Yeah,
ceilings and that
beautiful.
do that. As shadows yield to your light, there's so much doubt that we have about ourselves, and also just so much darkness out in, the world that wants to see your light dim or wants to see you not make it or go, the traditional track. So just like being so steadfast in the fact that like you're not going to let, your light dim or yourself down. You have to want it more than they do. And I
Yeah.
think that's, a big factor in it. And then unbound by bloodlines, I think most all of us have those familial, roots to us. And I'm really probably the first person in my entire family that kind of broke the mold, when it came to the traditional lifestyle, that a lot of people lived.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one person being willing to take that risk and just go for it and wear the pants and do what you want to do, and be a boss or take risks and not kind of stick to that track inspires other people to do so too.
Yeah, that's really beautiful, Emily, and I really appreciate, I like genuinely appreciate like the work you put into it. It's really really
You.
pretty. Um, and I think it's funny. Like I've been attempting to break the mold in the opposite direction on my end too. I've been trying to be I've been trying to hand the pants to Emily for so long, to my Emily. So yeah, but that's lovely. I wanted to to keep things fair, also write a haiku. So
Yay.
this is kind of one. This is for you. Or this for you. Um, Once red and now brown, like northern Kentucky trees, your hair looks lovely.
Oh my gosh, I'm blushing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, it's faded a little bit, but we're going darker soon. But that was amazing. I'm gonna break.
Yeah.
Love it.
Um, well, thank you so much for coming on. It was lovely to talk to you again. I would love to talk to you outside of this context again. I miss
Yeah.
chatting with you. Um, is there anything that you would like to plug on your way out? I know you got the podcast. You just sold your jewelry business.
I did, to another amazing female entrepreneur that's going to crush it. Yeah, I would say go listen to the Emily Effect podcast if you want a laugh. And that's really it. I really enjoyed being here, and I feel like I learned so much, and I am
Nice.
honored that you had me on.
I loved having you on, and I knew I would love talking to you. I know it's not in your wheelhouse, so I appreciate you
So out of
like
my comfort level.
no, but I appreciate you fielding all of my my questions and my rants, and that goes to everybody who's been on so far. Because you're right, I could talk to a brick wall, but I get to talk to you instead, which is awesome. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Alrighty, I'll chat with you later.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Talk soon.